Why do dogs have fleas? If you ask someone who thinks the way the upper class thinks, they'll tell you that the reason dogs have fleas is to make sure they don't forget that they're dogs. Just dogs. And this explains the kind of thinking that the upper class has when it comes to we the people, the ordinary people that they dominate and oppress and control. The upper class knows that if they don't treat us like dirt, we'll forget that our place is at the bottom of an unequal society, and we'll be more likely than ever to challenge the inequality that is the basis for the upper class being an upper class, for having the enormous wealth and power and privilege that they enjoy and take for granted. The upper class knows that ordinary people have to be constantly reminded that they don't deserve to live as well with the same dignity and respect as the upper class. It's the same reason that the slave owners treated the slaves like dirt, and the aristocracy and medieval serfdom treated the serfs like dirt. It's what any upper class has to do, must do, to keep the lower class at the bottom of society, and to do what's necessary to try to prevent the lower class, working class people from getting it into their head that they deserve to live just as well as any billionaire, which we do. So let me just remind you of some of the ways that the upper class treats us like dirt. They pay disgustingly low wages with paltry benefits, if any at all, that you can't even live on. That's treating us like dirt. In the retail industry, they have what's called on-call shifts. That means that the workers in the stores have to be on call whenever the boss phones them and says, you got to come in and work. But if the boss doesn't phone them, they don't get any work hours, they don't get any money. But they can't plan around this. They can't have a babysitter lined up or work a second job on the hours that they're not working the first job, because they don't know. The boss could call at any moment. They have to be ready to jump to the call and drive to the store and work. That's treating people like dirt. The rich don't provide affordable health care. They make us pay through the nose, and even then, when you have a really serious need for serious health care, that they might not cover it. I know someone personally who's being forced to choose between shelter and vitally needed health care. This is treating people like dirt. This is a person who works as hard as anybody else on this planet, by the way. Those high-stakes standardized tests that they're subjecting our children in the public schools to, that's a form of child abuse. I mean, literally, they've got little kids vomiting in anxiety and fear because of these high-stakes tests, standardized tests. They're designed deliberately to produce a certain large number of failing grades, and to do it in a way that makes sure that it's the poorest children who get those failing grades, who are then told, well, you're not smart enough, or you didn't work hard enough to even deserve a decent job. I discuss all these ways people are treated like dirt in an article I'm going to link at the bottom with more details about all of them. Then there's police brutality. The police treat working class people like dirt, especially the poorest and the non-white ones. They only do it for one reason, because that's what they're hired to do. And why are they hired to do that? By the rich? To make us know our place at the bottom of society. There's mass incarceration of people for crimes like marijuana use. Half the federal prisoners are in for using marijuana. This is outrageous. This is putting people in cages. That's treating people like dirt, if nothing else is. And it's rampant. They make decent paying jobs artificially scarce. All jobs could pay enough to live a decent lifestyle in this country easily. They deliberately make sure that that doesn't happen because they need to treat us like dirt. They force people to, work in these Walmart type jobs and then have to rely on welfare, and then they stigmatize welfare as just, what freeloaders and such are getting, so that they get looked down upon by the rest of the population. Talk about treating people like dirt. That certainly is. Then they have these Orwellian wars of social control based on lies, weapons of mass destruction, the Gulf of Tonkin, the list goes on and on and on. They force or manipulate, with the so-called poverty draft, people into killing innocent people abroad or risk being killed themselves, all based on lies. And the soldiers who survive, many of them get PTSD or even commit suicide. That's treating people like dirt. Most working class, the disproportionately, most smokers are working class people. And working class smokers, cigarette smokers, tobacco smokers, are treated like dirt. More and more, they can't even smoke in their own home because the federal government is pushing for all the public housing that has federal support to have new regulations that make it illegal for someone to smoke in their own home. They could build buildings just for smokers or people who don't mind living with smokers and solve that problem easily, and still let people who don't like cigarette smoke be in a building without cigarette smoke. They could do that easily, but no. They've decided to just say you can't smoke in your own home. There are people with babies that have to leave their babies alone to go outside to smoke, sometimes in cold, snowy weather. Hey, but if you're a rich person and you smoke, you can always smoke in your home. And if you're traveling, you can always find a hotel that caters to smokers and live in luxury no matter where you are, and smoke in your own home or your own dwelling if you're rich. You know that hospitals have policies now where they treat the rich people with extra special amenities and privileges and ultra dignity, whereas ordinary patients are treated more like dirt. Yeah, it's true. Talk about treating people like dirt. Have you seen the videos of those tent cities where homeless people with jobs, are living in pup tents by the thousands because the jobs don't pay enough to rent, never mind buy, a home? Talk about treating people like dirt. And if you do have a home that you can rent or own, you live in a town like mine, like most towns, and the big money developers come in and they say, we're going to build this big, huge luxury housing development right in your backyard, and you don't have a say about it. Oh yeah, you can go to a public hearing and complain, but then you're just ignored. We're treated like dirt. by the wealthy people who own the big development companies or control the mayor who's in their pockets. And then another way of treating us like dirt is the rich gaslight us. That means they try to make you think that you're crazy because you suspect that maybe the official story for the JFK assassination or the 9/11 attack, maybe those official stories aren't true. They just don't hold water. They don't make sense. You know it. You're not dumb. But the newspapers and the radio and the magazines controlled by the rich and the mass media, they act like those official stories are totally obviously true. And if you think otherwise, you must be crazy. Crazy. See, that's gaslighting. They want us to think that we're crazy for having common sense. And then there's the college kids being driven into debt slavery for the crime of trying to get the education they need to get a decent job so that they can work for some rich corporation to make rich people even richer. Wow. Talk about treating people like dirt. Okay, one more. Toxic waste. Guess where the toxic waste always seems to end up? In the neighborhoods where working class people live. Love Canal, on and on and on. That was just one of many examples. The people in Beverly Hills don't have toxic waste in their community. Isn't that strange? Well, that's because the rich don't want to treat the people in Beverly Hills like dirt. They want to treat us like dirt. Now, the moral of this story is that the rich treat us like dirt because they must. It's part of the necessary strategy of social control, of forcing people to accept their place at the bottom of society, to think of themselves as less worthy. It works unconsciously. If you're treated like dirt, you end up to a certain extent, even though you might, try to resist it consciously, part of you is being forced to just accept that, well, yeah, I don't have a right to live the same way Bill Gates does. And the rich are going to keep treating us like dirt as long as they are a rich upper class. The only way to end this disgusting way that they treat us is to remove the rich from power, and that means having no rich and no poor. It doesn't mean letting them still be billionaires, but changing the tax code. No. It means making them be the same as everybody else as far as economic wealth is concerned. It means that they will have an equal right with everybody else to contribute to the economy according to reasonable ability, and to take from it for free what they need or reasonably desire, or as equals with others, to be eligible to receive scarce things when they're equitably rationed according to need, so that you and I and Bill Gates would have equal status in this regard. And Bill Gates would not have billions of dollars to his name. And he would not have the enormous power in society that stems from having that massive amount of money. Until we have an egalitarian society in which people are equal in the sense I just described, no rich and no poor, we're going to be treated like dirt. And You know, we can elect a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren to change the tax code, and the rich will get together in private and laugh at it and say to themselves, boy, these new tax codes and new regulations are going to fundamentally change the way we get around them. That's what they'll be joking together if we elect these reformers. You know, the only reason these reformer politicians are talking about, you know, more equality and so forth is because the rich know that they need some politicians to talk that way to keep us having some faith that we can solve the problem of being treated like dirt by voting for someone, and instead of coming to realize the obvious truth that the way to solve the problem is to make an egalitarian revolution that removes the rich from power, and does that in the way that I will describe in my article, how we can remove the rich from power. It's not by voting, believe me. I'm hoping that if you agree with some of what I've said, that you will start to think about how to build an egalitarian revolutionary movement that mobilizes people. I'm making more videos exactly about that, and I'll post about it. One way is the article posted below here called Pose for a Photograph to Frighten the Rich. Thank you. Goodbye.